The chamber was cold and wet. Water dripped slowly from the ceiling, each drop echoing like a cruel reminder of time slipping away. The air was heavy with the smell of rusted chains and damp stone. In the center of the room, Kayla sat on the ground, her wrists bound by metal cuffs that glowed faintly with alien energy. The shackles were tight, biting into her skin, leaving angry red marks. She tried to pull free, but they burned whenever she struggled. She had long stopped crying. Tears had no power here. Her people had warned her about this place, the underground chambers the soldiers called the breeding pits. Once taken here, no one ever returned. Kayla had seen the faces of those dragged in before her, their eyes wide with fear, their voices screaming until the sound was swallowed by these same stone walls. Now, she was the one waiting. Her heart beat fast, her stomach twisted with dread. She hugged her knees close, as if making herself small could make her disappear. Two guards stood at the far end, their tall bodies blocking the faint light from a crack in the ceiling. They spoke in a harsh language, but Kayla understood enough to know what they were saying. They laughed about her fate, joked about how weak her resistance had been. One of them slammed his weapon against the bars of her cage, making her flinch. The sound echoed like thunder in the enclosed chamber. Kayla's body shook, but inside her mind, anger fought with fear. She hated them. She hated this place. Yet, her strength was gone, drained by days without proper food or rest. Her lips were dry, her throat burning. Every breath felt like a fight. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine her home, the warm fields where she once walked freely, the sound of her mother's voice. But the images slipped away like smoke, replaced by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching from the corridor. The guards straightened. Their joking ended. The footsteps were slower, heavier, as if each step carried weight and authority. Kayla's chest tightened. She knew what this meant. The ritual was near. She pressed her back to the wall, her chains clinking, her heart pounding so loud she thought the guards might hear it. The door creaked open, and light spilled into the chamber. A tall figure stepped inside, his silhouette sharp against the glow behind him. The guards saluted quickly, their laughter gone. The figure moved closer, his boots scraping the stone floor. Kayla could not see his face, only the gleam of armor, the smell of oil and metal. He stopped in front of her cage, and she felt his gaze like cold fire on her skin. "You will be prepared," he said, his voice low and filled with command. "The breeding must continue. She is the right age." Kayla's breath caught in her throat. Her whole body felt frozen. She wanted to scream, to beg, but no sound left her lips. The guards opened the cage, their weapons ready. One of them grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her forward. The chain burned her skin as she stumbled, her knees scraping the ground. She tried to resist, but the cuff shocked her with a sharp pain that made her cry out. The commander turned to leave, not even sparing her a second glance. To him, she was nothing. Just a tool, a body, something to be used and discarded. That thought filled Kayla with despair so deep she thought her heart might stop. She wanted to fight, to claw, to bite, but her strength was gone. Her body betrayed her, weak and trembling. The guards dragged her toward the exit. The hallway beyond was darker, lined with torches that flickered and hissed. Kayla's bare feet scraped against the rough stone, leaving small trails of blood. Every step closer to the ritual chamber felt like another nail closing her coffin. She could hear other voices up ahead, deeper, louder, waiting for her arrival. Suddenly, the torches flickered strangely, as if the air itself shivered. The guards paused, confused. The sound of boots echoed again, but this time it was different, sharper, quicker, not the heavy steps of their kind. The sound grew louder, closer, until it filled the hallway. Kayla's heart pounded, her fear mixing with sudden confusion. "Who's there?" One guard barked, his voice sharp. No answer came, only silence and the steady rhythm of approaching steps. Kayla lifted her head weakly, her eyes straining to see beyond the torches. A shadow moved at the end of the hall, tall but shaped differently. Not broad and scaled like the soldiers, but leaner, the outlines strange to her eyes. The guards shifted nervously, weapons raised. "Identify yourself," one shouted. The shadow kept walking. Each step was confident, steady, as if the figure had no fear at all. The air around them grew heavy, like something dangerous was about to happen. Kayla felt her breath catch, her chains rattling as she tried to move closer to the wall. The guards stepped forward, blocking the path, their weapons glowing. Then, From the shadow, a voice spoke. It was not like theirs. Rough, guttural, filled with malice. This voice was different, strange but firm, carrying a tone she had never heard before. Let her go. The guards froze. Kayla's eyes widened. The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, the torchlight revealed part of his face. His skin was not scaled. It was smooth. His eyes burned not with cruelty, but with defiance. He was not one of them. He was something else. A human. Kayla's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her chest. She didn't know who he was or why he was here, but in that moment, for the first time since her capture, a spark of hope flickered inside her. Would you like me to continue this exact style for part 2, a human in the dark, into 900 words as well? Daniel moved slowly, his back close to the damp stone wall, each step careful and silent. The alien fortress was bigger than he had expected, tunnels stretching like veins in the earth, lit by flickering torches that threw long, dancing shadows. His heart pounded in his chest, but his hands were steady. He had been trained for danger, but nothing had prepared him for this, sneaking into the enemy's breeding pits. He had heard the rumors, the whispered stories about what these aliens did to their captives, but seeing it with his own eyes was worse than anything he had imagined. He paused near a corner, listening. Voices echoed faintly down the hall, harsh, guttural, filled with cruel laughter. He understood none of the words, but the tone was clear. Mockery, enjoyment, evil. Slowly he leaned forward and peered around the stone edge. 2 guards stood outside an iron-barred cage. Inside, curled against the wall, was a figure. Daniel narrowed his eyes. It was a girl. Her skin faintly glowed with an otherworldly hue, her silver hair tangled and dirty, her body thin and bruised. Chains held her arms tight against the wall. She was trembling, but her chin was lifted, as if refusing to cry in front of her captors. Daniel's throat tightened. She was so young. He pulled back before the guards could see him. His mind raced. He had planned to map the tunnels, to gather information, maybe destroy supplies. But now, seeing her, he couldn't just walk away. He knew the look of someone moments away from a fate worse than death. He clenched his jaw. His mission had changed. The guards laughed again, and Daniel caught a single word repeated in their tongue. He had heard it before, during briefings. It meant breeding. His stomach twisted. They were going to use her for something unspeakable, something cruel, and they were preparing to do it soon. His pulse quickened. He had no reinforcements, no backup. His rifle had been lost during the infiltration, leaving him with only a combat knife, 2 small charges, and his fists. Against trained alien soldiers, it was madness to fight. But leaving her here, that was impossible. Daniel pressed his hand against the wall, steadying his breath. He remembered the faces of his comrades, the ones who had died when the aliens first attacked Earth. He remembered their screams, the fire raining from the sky, the helpless civilians caught in chains. Rage burned hot inside him. If he could save even one life, he would. He waited until the guards turned slightly, distracted by their conversation. Then, silent as a shadow, he stepped out of the darkness. His boots made no sound on the stone. He crept closer, heart hammering in his ears. The girl's eyes flicked up, catching movement, and for a moment she froze. Her lips parted slightly, surprise and confusion in her glowing eyes. Daniel lifted a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, though her chest rose and fell quickly. The guards shifted again. One of them turned suddenly, his eyes narrowing. He sniffed the air, suspicious. Daniel tensed, his hand tightening on the hilt of his knife. The alien stepped forward, scanning the shadows. His weapon hummed with deadly energy. He came closer, closer, until Daniel could see the faint ridges on his scaled skin. The soldier turned his head just slightly, and Daniel struck. His arm shot out, the blade flashing in the torchlight, sliding between the alien's armor plates into the gap near his neck. The guard gurgled, his eyes wide in shock, and crumpled silently to the ground. The second guard spun, eyes wide, weapon raised. He shouted something in his harsh tongue, but before he could fire, Daniel was on him. He slammed into the alien, driving him back against the bars of the cage. The weapon discharged, energy sparking wildly into the ceiling, stone shattering. The alien roared, swinging a massive fist, but Daniel ducked, driving his knife upward into the alien's side. The creature staggered, strength failing, and Daniel wrenched the weapon from his grip before stabbing again, hard and fast, until the body slumped lifeless at his feet. Silence filled the corridor, broken only by Daniel's heavy breathing. He wiped the blade quickly, his eyes darting to the girl. She stared at him, her eyes wide, her whole body pressed against the wall as if she couldn't believe what she had just seen. Daniel crouched near the bars. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered. His voice was calm but urgent. "I'm human. I came to get you out." The girl blinked, her lips trembling. The word human sounded strange on her tongue, but she repeated it softly, as if testing it. She looked at him with suspicion, confusion, but also a spark of hope she tried to hide. Daniel glanced around quickly. He knew more soldiers would come soon. The sound of the weapon discharging might have echoed through the tunnels. He pulled at the lock, but it was sealed with alien energy, glowing faintly. He frowned. This wasn't going to open easily. "Hold on," he muttered. He pulled one of the small charges from his belt, pressing it against the lock. The girl's eyes widened, shaking her head, but Daniel gave her a sharp look. "It's safe. Just stay back." The device beeped softly, the timer blinking. Daniel pulled her as far as the chain would allow, shielding her with his own body as the charge went off. A sharp crack split the air, smoke filling the chamber. The bars bent outward, broken enough to squeeze through. Daniel pulled the chains, breaking them free of the wall with another strike of the knife. Sparks flew as alien energy fizzled out. The girl gasped as her wrists were freed for the first time in days. She stumbled, weak, and nearly fell. Daniel caught her, steadying her gently, her glowing eyes locked on his face. For the first time, she spoke in a trembling voice, words heavy with disbelief. "Why? Why help me?" Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. "Because no one deserves what they were about to do to you. And because humans don't walk away from this kind of evil." Before she could answer, the sound of distant shouting filled the hall. More guards were coming. Daniel pulled her close, his knife ready again. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "We're not safe yet." The girl swallowed hard, her chains rattling softly in her trembling hands. For the first time, she let herself believe escape might be possible. But in the echoing darkness of the alien fortress, survival was far from certain. "Would you like me to continue part 3, the desperate rescue, in the same 900-word, simple English, suspenseful style?" The sound of running footsteps grew louder, echoing through the long stone tunnels. The girl's breath quickened, fear rising in her chest again. Daniel grabbed her wrist, pulling her gently but firmly out of the broken cage. She stumbled, but kept moving, her weak legs shaking under her own weight. He looked both ways down the corridor, his knife still gripped tightly in his hand, but he knew the blade alone would not save them from a dozen soldiers. Shouts in the alien tongue bounced off the walls. They were close. Daniel's mind raced. He spotted a narrow side passage to the left, darker than the rest. "This way," he whispered urgently, guiding her. The girl followed, her glowing eyes darting nervously, her chains dragging and clinking softly against the stone floor. They reached the corner just as 3 soldiers came into view from the main hall. Their eyes locked onto the bent cage, then to the dark passage where Daniel had disappeared. They roared, their weapons buzzing to life, and charged. Daniel shoved the girl behind him. His heart hammered in his chest, but his focus sharpened. The first alien swung his weapon high, aiming to crush him. Daniel ducked, ramming his shoulder into the alien's chest, knocking him back. He slashed upward with the knife, cutting across the throat where the armor plates were weakest. Hot blood sprayed, the alien gurgled, collapsing in seconds. The second guard lunged forward with a spear-like weapon that crackled with energy. Daniel twisted, but the blade grazed his arm, burning his skin. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, and drove his knife into the alien's gut, shoving with all his strength until the creature roared and fell. The third guard aimed his blaster at Daniel, the barrel glowing. Kayla gasped, her chains rattling, as she instinctively tried to pull Daniel away. In that split second, Daniel snatched up the fallen alien's spear, hurling it like a javelin. It struck the guard square in the chest, the force knocking him against the wall. The blaster shot fired wildly into the ceiling, blasting stone and showering sparks. Daniel rushed forward, ripping the weapon from the alien's hands before finishing him with a swift strike. The tunnel went silent again, only the sound of their heavy breathing and the drip of water breaking it. Daniel pressed his hand against his burned arm, the pain sharp, but his eyes stayed locked ahead. "Move," he said firmly to the girl. She nodded quickly, fear in her glowing eyes, but also something else, shock at what she had just seen. This human, smaller than the aliens, weaker in build, had killed 3 of them with nothing but a knife and sheer will. She could not believe it. They hurried down the passage, but the noise of alarm bells soon rang through the fortress. Red lights flared, bathing the walls in a sick glow. The girl stumbled again, clutching her wrists where the shackles had rubbed them raw. Daniel slowed, helping her to her feet. "Stay close," he told her. "I'll get you out." They turned another corner, but more guards appeared, blocking the way. Daniel's grip tightened on the stolen blaster. He raised it, firing a burst. The weapon's recoil shook his arms, but the shots tore into the soldiers, dropping 2 before they could raise their shields. The others roared and advanced. Daniel ducked behind a crumbled wall, pulling the girl down with him. Energy bolts slammed into the stone, sparks flying everywhere. Kayla pressed her hands over her ears, trembling. She looked at him, her lips forming silent words. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel didn't answer. He leaned out, fired again, and another alien fell. But there were too many. They were closing in fast. Daniel's eyes darted around, searching desperately. Then he saw it, a crack in the wall, a half-hidden service tunnel barely wide enough to crawl through. "There," he whispered, pointing. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward it. Blaster fire scorched the ground as they ran. Daniel dove into the tunnel first, dragging her after him. The space was tight, the stones scraping against their shoulders. Kayla's chains clanged loudly as they crawled. Behind them, alien voices shouted, weapons firing. But the narrow passage was too small for the larger soldiers to follow. Shots sizzled against the stone, but they couldn't reach further inside. The tunnel twisted sharply before dropping into a wider chamber. Daniel pulled himself out, then reached back to help Kayla. She collapsed beside him, panting, her face pale from exhaustion. He crouched low, listening. The aliens were shouting in frustration, but they weren't coming through. At least, not yet. Daniel checked the stolen blaster. It was hot, nearly overloaded. He tossed it aside and held his knife again. His burned arm ached, sweat dripping down his face, but his eyes were fierce. He wasn't stopping now. Kayla sat trembling, hugging her knees. Her glowing eyes studied him, confusion and disbelief written on her face. "You fight for me," she whispered in a broken voice. It wasn't a question, but a statement filled with shock. Daniel looked at her, his face grim. "You deserve better than this. No one should suffer like you have. If I can stop them, even for one person, I will." Her throat tightened. She had never heard words like that, not from anyone. Her people lived in fear of the aliens. None of them would have dared to stand against the soldiers, let alone fight them barehanded. Yet here was this human, bloodied and burned, still pushing forward with determination in his eyes. Before she could reply, more voices echoed from deeper in the fortress. Reinforcements were moving fast. Daniel stood, offering his hand to her. "We're not safe here. Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, taking his hand. He pulled her up, supporting her weight as they hurried into the next passage. The sound of alarms chased them like hunting hounds, but Daniel's jaw was set. He wasn't giving up. Kayla's chains dragged behind her, the sound sharp in the silence between alarms. But for the first time since her capture, her heart carried something new. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a fragile thread of hope, tied to the human who had chosen to fight when no one else would. Would you like me to expand Part 4, The Escape Through Fire, in the same way into 900 words next? The alarms screamed through the fortress, a shrill sound that made the stone walls vibrate. Red lights flashed in every corridor, throwing strange shadows that moved like living things. Daniel gripped the girl's hand tightly and pulled her forward, his steps fast but careful. He could feel the heat of pursuit behind them, the angry roars of alien soldiers echoing closer and closer. Kayla stumbled, her weak legs dragging on the uneven floor. Her chains scraped the stone, sparks flying where the metal links struck. Daniel glanced at her, his jaw tightening. She was too weak to run fast, and the aliens were closing in. He didn't think twice. He bent down, scooped her up in his arms, and carried her against his chest. She gasped, shocked, her glowing eyes wide. She was not used to being touched with care. "Hold on," Daniel said, his voice firm but low, as if there was no room for argument. She clutched at his torn jacket, her heart beating fast, not only from fear, but from the strange feeling of safety in his arms. The corridor ahead suddenly shook as an explosion ripped through the ceiling. Dust and fire rained down. Daniel shielded her with his body, pushing through the smoke. Flames licked the walls, and the air grew hot and hard to breathe. The aliens had triggered the defense systems. They wanted to burn him out. Daniel coughed but kept running. He spotted a heavy door ahead, its frame glowing from heat. He kicked it hard again and again until it cracked open. He pushed through, entering a wide chamber filled with machinery. Pipes hissed, steam burst into the air, and the ground shook under heavy gears turning above. Kayla coughed softly against his chest, the heat making her dizzy. Daniel set her down carefully behind a thick pipe. "Stay low," he ordered. She nodded, though her eyes filled with fear when she looked at him. He turned toward the doorway, hearing the pounding boots of soldiers rushing closer. The first alien charged in, his blaster raised. Daniel didn't wait. He snatched up a loose metal rod from the floor and swung it with all his strength. It cracked against the alien's skull, dropping him instantly. Another soldier rushed in, firing wildly. Sparks flew as bolts hit the machinery. Daniel dove behind cover, dragging Kayla with him. The heat in the room grew unbearable. Pipes burst, spilling steam that hissed and filled the air with a burning fog. Daniel's skin stung from the heat, but he moved quickly, using the smoke as cover. He leapt from behind one machine to another, striking the aliens one by one when they entered. His knife flashed, his fists slammed, his body moved with desperate energy. Kayla watched him, her heart pounding. She had never seen such determination. He fought like a man who carried the weight of an entire world. Every time she thought he would fall, he pushed back harder. She clutched her chains, whispering to herself, almost as if praying. But the aliens kept coming, too many. Daniel grabbed her hand again, pulling her toward a ladder on the far side of the chamber. "Climb," he shouted over the roar of flames and machinery. She hesitated, her eyes filled with doubt, but he pushed her forward. "Go!" Her chains made the climb difficult, but she pulled herself up, step by step, her breath ragged. Daniel followed close behind, glancing down as more soldiers stormed into the chamber. They fired up at the ladder, energy bolts scorching the metal. Daniel gritted his teeth and fired a stolen blaster back, covering Kayla until she reached the top platform. He pulled himself up beside her, panting. Ahead was a narrow walkway above the burning chamber. The heat rose in waves, almost blinding. Daniel guided her across, the metal shaking under their weight. Suddenly, part of the platform cracked, the bolts snapping. Kayla screamed as the walkway tilted, nearly throwing her into the fire below. Daniel grabbed her just in time, pulling her against him. She clung to him, trembling, her glowing eyes staring into his. For a brief moment, their fear connected them, silent but powerful. He pulled her across the last section of the walkway and kicked open another door. Behind them, the chamber collapsed in fire, the screams of aliens drowned out by the roar of the explosion. They entered a long hallway, this one lit by burning torches instead of red alarms. But the air here was worse. Smoke and fire spread from behind them, chasing them through the tunnel. Kayla coughed hard, her body weak, stumbling again. Daniel didn't hesitate. He lifted her back into his arms and ran. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed for rest, but he forced himself onward. The hallway split into two. Daniel paused, listening. One path echoed with the sound of boots, the other with silence. He chose silence, turning right. The walls shook again as another explosion blasted from behind, throwing them to the ground. Daniel shielded Kayla, rolling to protect her from falling debris. When the dust cleared, part of the passage had collapsed, blocking the way back. "Good," he muttered, though his chest heaved with exhaustion. "At least they'll have to find another way." Kayla looked at him, her lips trembling. She wanted to ask why he risked everything, why he carried her as if she mattered. But words failed. She only looked at him with wide, shining eyes as he helped her stand again. They moved forward until faint light appeared ahead. A draft of fresh, cool air touched Kayla's face. She gasped softly, realizing they were close to an exit. Daniel felt it too. Hope surged in his chest, though he didn't relax. They weren't free yet. As they approached the light, alien voices rose again, this time from the outside. Guards waited near the exit, weapons ready. Daniel cursed under his breath. There was no turning back. He crouched, pulling Kayla close behind a large stone. "Stay low," he whispered. His hand tightened on the knife, his eyes fixed on the silhouettes guarding the way out. His body was trembling from burns, cuts, and exhaustion, but his spirit burned hotter than the fire around them. Kayla's heart raced. She knew the battle was not over. Escape was only steps away, but those steps could be their last. She pressed her glowing eyes shut, clutching the chains in her hands, praying the humans' courage would be enough to carry them both through the fire and into freedom. Would you like me to continue part 5, The Price of Trust, into 900 words in the same suspenseful, simple English style? Kayla's legs shook as she leaned against the stone wall, trying to catch her breath. Her wrists burned where the shackles had rubbed her raw, and every muscle in her body ached from days of hunger and chains. The cool air near the exit should have brought relief, but her heart raced with confusion. She stared at the human, at the way he crouched in the shadows, planning their next move with sharp eyes. She didn't understand him. No one risked themselves for someone like her. Her own people would have left her to her fate, whispering prayers but never daring to fight the soldiers. Yet this stranger, this human, had killed, bled, and carried her through fire without hesitation. She felt a deep mistrust rising inside her. What if this was a trick? What if he only freed her because he wanted something worse later? Daniel sensed her eyes on him. His jaw was tight, his face smeared with blood and smoke, but his focus never wavered. He scanned the guards outside, counting their weapons, measuring the chance of escape. Then he looked at Kayla, his expression softer for just a moment. "We're almost there," he whispered. "You'll be free soon." The words struck her like a knife. Free. Could it be true? She hugged herself, her body trembling. "Why?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Why are you doing this? I don't know you. You don't know me. Why not leave me behind?" Daniel looked at her, his dark eyes steady. "Because leaving you behind would make me no better than them," he said simply. "You matter, even if you don't believe it yet." Kayla's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but her mind screamed with doubt. She had seen kindness twisted into cruelty before. She clenched her fists, her chains rattling. Outside, the guards moved, their voices echoing. Daniel pressed closer to the wall, pulling her with him. She resisted, fear flooding her chest. "No," she hissed suddenly, her voice sharp. "Maybe you're lying. Maybe you work for them. Maybe you freed me only to take me somewhere worse." Daniel froze, his eyes narrowing at her words. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the crackling of fire behind. Kayla's glowing eyes were filled with panic, and her body pressed back against the wall as if she expected him to strike her. Instead, Daniel let out a slow breath. He lowered his knife and placed it gently on the ground between them. Then he raised his hands, palms open. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it already," he said quietly. "But I didn't. I fought them. I carried you. I burned myself to keep you alive. That's the truth." Kayla's lips trembled. Her gaze dropped to his hands, rough and cut, then to his burned arm. The wounds were real. The blood was his. Slowly, her panic began to ease, though doubt still lingered. Daniel picked up the knife again, but did not point it at her. He crouched low, peering through the crack toward the guards. "You don't have to trust me," he said, his voice firm. "But if we don't move together, they'll kill us both. Decide quickly." Her throat tightened. He was right. The shouts outside grew louder, footsteps crunching closer. She swallowed hard, nodding. I'll follow," she whispered, though her voice shook. Daniel gave a short nod, then grabbed a loose stone from the ground. He hurled it down the opposite corridor. The sound clattered loudly, echoing through the tunnels. The guards shouted, turning their heads toward the noise. Daniel seized the chance. He grabbed Kayla's hand, pulling her toward the exit. She almost resisted, but something in his grip stopped her. It wasn't rough like the guards. It wasn't cruel. His hold was strong, steady, protective. Against her own doubt, she let him lead her. They darted from the shadows, Daniel moving fast, every step measured. The guards turned too late. He slashed the throat of one before the alien could raise his weapon, then kicked another into the wall. Kayla stumbled behind him, terrified, but he never let her go. One guard lunged at her, claws reaching for her throat. Kayla froze, her body locking in fear. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling her behind him and ramming his knife deep into the alien's chest. The creature roared and collapsed at her feet. Kayla's heart raced. She stared at the human, at the way he put himself between her and danger every single time. The path ahead opened into the night. Stars shone above, bright and endless. The air was cool, clean, so different from the choking tunnels. Kayla gasped, her glowing eyes wide as she saw the open sky for the first time in what felt like forever. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Daniel released her hand for the first time since freeing her. He pointed to the forest beyond the fortress walls. "Run," he said. "Don't stop until we're far from here." She looked at him, confusion swirling inside her. "You're not coming?" "I'll cover us," he replied, turning back toward the guards who still shouted behind them. "Go. I promised you freedom." Her chest ached. She wanted to run, to escape, but something in her froze. For the first time, she didn't want to leave him. Her mind still whispered doubts, but her heart whispered something else. Trust. Fragile, uncertain, but real. She stepped closer, touching his burned arm lightly. "Don't leave me," she whispered. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes begged. Daniel looked at her, and in his gaze she saw no lies, no cruelty, only determination and a strange warmth that made her chest tighten. He gave a small nod. "Then stay close, and don't let go." The trust between them was fragile, born in fire and blood, but it was enough to push them forward. Kayla clutched his arm tightly as they ran together into the night, leaving behind the fortress of chains. Would you like me to continue part 6? Facing the enemy commander into 900 words in the same suspenseful, simple English style? The night air was sharp and cold, filled with the smell of smoke from the burning tunnels behind them. Daniel kept Kayla close, guiding her quickly through the rough forest terrain. Branches scratched his arms, and the uneven ground made every step difficult. But he did not slow down. Kayla stumbled often, still weak, but he held her steady, never letting her fall. For a short moment, she felt as if freedom was close. The fortress was shrinking behind them, and the sky stretched open, wide and endless. But the sound of horns cut through the night. Deep, terrible horns that echoed across the hills. Kayla froze, her body stiff with fear. Her glowing eyes widened. She knew that sound. "The commander," she whispered. Her voice shook. "He comes." Daniel's face hardened. He had seen the commander once inside the chamber, a tall figure in gleaming black armor, his voice cold and commanding. If the others were brutal, this one was worse. Daniel gripped his knife tighter. He had fought soldiers, but this was different. This was their leader. The ground trembled faintly as heavy steps approached. The trees swayed as if they too were afraid. From the shadows of the forest, the commander emerged. His armor reflected the moonlight, sharp and cruel. His eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, and his weapon was a massive blade that hummed with energy. Around him, smaller soldiers formed a circle, blocking any path of escape. Kayla clutched Daniel's sleeve, her chains rattling softly. She whispered, "You cannot fight him. No one can." The commander stepped forward, his voice deep and mocking. "So this is the human who dares steal from me. You look smaller than I imagined. Fragile, weak, yet somehow you killed my guards." He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "Impressive for a creature that should be kneeling." Daniel said nothing. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, but his grip on the knife never loosened. The commander's gaze shifted to Kayla. "And you, worthless little thing. Do you think he saved you? No, he delays the inevitable. You belong to us, your body, your blood, your children. That is your purpose." Kayla flinched, her body trembling. She pressed closer to Daniel, hiding behind him. Daniel's jaw clenched tight. "She belongs to no one," he said, his voice sharp as steel. "Not you, not anyone. She is free." The commander laughed, the sound cruel and echoing. "Free? Do you think you can stop me, human? I could crush you with one hand. You are nothing but a bug crawling where you do not belong." Daniel's eyes burned with fire. "Try me." The commander raised his massive blade, and with a roar, he charged. The ground shook with every step. Daniel pushed Kayla aside just as the blade came down, slicing the earth where she had stood. The shockwave threw dirt and stone into the air. Kayla cried out, covering her head. Daniel rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. He sprang to his feet, rushing forward. His knife flashed, striking the commander's armor, but the blade barely scratched it. The commander swung again, and Daniel ducked, the weapon grazing his back and tearing his jacket. The force sent him sprawling to the ground. Kayla screamed his name, her glowing eyes wide with terror. The commander laughed, towering over Daniel. Pathetic. Is this the best your kind can do? Weak. Always weak. Daniel forced himself up, blood dripping from a cut on his shoulder. His breaths came ragged, but his eyes never left the commander. Weak doesn't fight like this, he growled. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged, dodging another swing and stabbing into the joint between the armor plates. The blade sank in deep. The commander roared in pain, staggering back. Kayla gasped, her heart racing. She had never seen anyone draw blood from him. Enraged, the commander lashed out, kicking Daniel across the ground. He slammed into a tree, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. He groaned, struggling to rise. The commander stalked toward him, fury in his glowing eyes. "You will die slowly," he snarled, "and I will make her watch." Kayla's breath came fast, her body trembling. Fear gripped her, but anger burned too. She looked at Daniel, broken and bleeding, yet still trying to rise. He was fighting not for himself, but for her. Her hands shook as she reached for the broken chain still attached to her wrist. The metal was sharp, heavy. She clenched it tight. The commander lifted his blade high, ready to finish Daniel. But before the strike could fall, Kayla screamed and rushed forward. She swung the chain with all her strength, the metal striking the commander's face. Sparks flew as it scraped across his eye. The alien roared, staggering back in shock. Daniel seized the moment. With every ounce of strength left, he drove his knife deep into the commander's exposed side, twisting hard. The roar turned into a choked cry as the commander fell to one knee, his blade dropping from his hand. Daniel staggered, his chest heaving. Kayla stood beside him, her eyes wide, her whole body shaking. She couldn't believe what she had just done. The soldiers around them hesitated, their leader wounded. Daniel grabbed Kayla's hand and pulled her close. "Run," he whispered urgently. She nodded, her trust finally stronger than her fear. Together, they sprinted into the forest, leaving the commander on his knees, his furious roar echoing into the night. The battle was not over, but for the first time, Kayla knew the human was more than just a rescuer. He was a fighter who would not stop, even against the impossible. Would you like me to continue Part 7? A new bond forged in fire into 900 words, keeping the same suspenseful, simple English style? The forest was dark, the trees tall and endless, their branches reaching like claws toward the stars. Daniel's breath came in short gasps as he ran, Kayla's hand tight in his. Behind them, the commander's furious roar still echoed, a sound that shook the ground and carried through the night. The soldiers would come again. They both knew it. But for now, they had slipped away into the shadows of the wilderness. Daniel slowed when Kayla stumbled. She could barely keep up, her body weak from hunger and wounds. He stopped near a fallen log, pulling her down with him to rest. She leaned against the rough bark, her chest heaving, sweat dripping down her glowing skin. Her chains rattled softly, still clinging to her wrists like cruel reminders. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked, his voice low, steady, though his own body screamed with pain. His arm was burned, his back sliced, his whole body aching from the commander's strikes. Kayla shook her head weakly. "No, just tired," she whispered. Her glowing eyes lifted to his face, studying every cut and bruise. He had bled for her. He had risked everything. The thought made her heart twist in ways she could not explain. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the night wind. Kayla finally spoke, her voice trembling. "When they took me, I prayed for death. I thought it was the only escape. But then you came." Her lips trembled as she looked down at her hands. "I thought you would be like them. I thought you wanted something in return. But you didn't." Daniel leaned back against the log, staring at the stars through the trees. "I wanted to stop them," he said softly. "One life saved is worth every risk. That's what keeps me going." Kayla's chest tightened. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she could feel. She turned her eyes toward him again, searching his face for any sign of lies. There were none. Only exhaustion, pain, and a fierce determination that burned brighter than the stars. The forest grew quiet, almost peaceful, but Daniel's instincts stayed sharp. He listened carefully, his hand never far from his knife. He knew the aliens would not give up. The commander would come again, and when he did, the fight would be harder than before. But sitting there, Kayla leaning beside him, Daniel felt something shift. He was not fighting just to resist the enemy anymore. He was fighting for her. Kayla's hand brushed against his arm by accident, and she pulled back quickly, embarrassed. But Daniel caught her hand gently, holding it still. "You're safe now," he said, his voice firm. "As long as I'm alive, I won't let them take you again." Her glowing eyes shimmered, and she whispered, "They called you weak, all of them. But you are stronger than anyone I have ever seen." Daniel gave a tired smile, shaking his head. "I'm no stronger than any man. I just refuse to stop." For a long moment, Kayla said nothing. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, surprising herself. She had never trusted anyone like this, never allowed herself to feel safe. Yet with him, even with danger still close, she felt a strange warmth. The night passed slowly, each sound in the forest making Daniel tense. At dawn, a faint light touched the trees. Kayla stirred, opening her eyes. She saw Daniel still awake, his back straight, knife ready in his hand, watching the shadows. He hadn't slept, not even for a moment. He had guarded her the entire night. Her chest ached. No one had ever done that for her. Suddenly, the distant sound of horns echoed again. Kayla's heart jumped in fear, but Daniel's jaw tightened. He stood, pulling her to her feet. "We keep moving," he said firmly. They pushed through the forest, branches snapping underfoot. Kayla's legs wobbled, but Daniel supported her, his arm around her shoulders. She wanted to tell him to leave her, to save himself, but she knew he wouldn't listen. He was too stubborn, too determined. Finally, the trees opened into a wide clearing. On the far side, cliffs rose high, their stone faces catching the morning sun. At the base of the cliffs was a narrow cave entrance, half hidden by vines. Daniel pointed to it. "We can rest there. Hide until they pass." Kayla nodded, hope flickering again. They hurried toward it, but before they reached the cave, a sound made them stop. The ground shook slightly. From the trees behind, armored soldiers appeared, and among them, the commander himself. His armor was cracked where Daniel's knife had struck, his eye scarred from Kayla's chain, but his fury was stronger than ever. "You cannot run from me," the commander roared, his voice shaking the air. "I will tear you both apart." Kayla gasped, clinging to Daniel's arm. But Daniel stood tall, his body broken and tired, yet his spirit burning like fire. He stepped forward, placing himself between Kayla and the commander once more. His knife looked small compared to the massive blade the alien carried, but Daniel's stance did not falter. Kayla whispered, her voice shaking, "You can't win. He's too strong." Daniel looked back at her, his dark eyes calm. "Maybe, but I'll fight until my last breath, and if I fall, you run. Don't stop." Her heart squeezed painfully. She didn't want to leave him. She didn't want him to fall. Before she could speak, the commander charged again, his blade raised. Daniel met him head on, fury in his movements. The clash shook the clearing. Sparks flew as steel met alien energy. Daniel dodged, struck, rolled, using speed against brute strength. The commander roared, swinging wildly, but Daniel kept pushing, each strike more desperate than the last. Kayla cried out, torn between terror and hope. Then, with a final roar, Daniel drove his knife into the commander's chest, deep into the wound he had made before. The alien staggered, dropping his weapon, his massive body collapsing onto the ground. Silence fell across the clearing. Daniel swayed, his body trembling, his knife dripping with blood. He turned to Kayla, his breath ragged. "It's over," he whispered. Kayla ran to him, tears finally spilling from her glowing eyes. She caught him before he fell, holding him tightly. Her voice shook as she whispered against his shoulder. "They said humans were weak, but you are the strongest of all." The rising sun washed over them, painting the world in light. For the first time, Kayla felt truly free. And for the first time, she trusted not only the human who saved her, but the bond they now shared, born in fire, pain, and the courage to fight the impossible. Would you like me to now combine all 7 parts into one full-flowing story so it reads like a complete HFY tale for your channel?